Good morning and welcome to the first week of this class. This week we're going to be talking about Chapter 1. I just wanted to give you a few notes. You will have an opportunity to see my notes, my outlines, my objectives, which are questions, and also the PowerPoint presentation if we were in a face-to-face class. I don't actually do all of that in a face-to-face class, but I give you all that information just so you can, while you're reading, also review my notes from each chapter. This week we're looking at the first chapter where we're talking about what is developmental psychology and what do we talk about in developmental psychology. And I think the first thing that you should remember is that this is about humans. This is not the developmental psychology of dogs or fish or anything like that. We're talking about human beings, and consequently, we'll kind of struggle with this question of whether what we're talking about has to do with everybody, or whether what we're talking about has to do with you as an individual, or your mother as an individual, or your girlfriend as an individual, or whatever we're talking about. We are looking at what we'll call what's general, which we can learn about human beings, and then we'll also talk about what's individual. So there's a complexity to human beings. I have to say that theoretically, I believe that human beings are far more complex than any other living creature on the earth. And for that reason, I tend to go toward human psychology, human development. And so people fascinate me in their uniqueness. So where we'll talk about questions, I offer questions that help us to understand the complexity of humans and the diversity of humans. You'll also find some commonalities of patterns so that we can say, just generally in adolescence, say, this is what we look for. Or in the old age, this is what we look for in development. Okay. You will see, I think, probably three major issues in this class. And that is the first one, of course, what we'll call universal versus context-specific. Context-specific being the explanation of what makes us diverse in individuals. And the universal, what do we have in common as humans? Okay, we'll also look at the question of nature and nurture. Nature being that which explains who you are in terms of your biology, your genetics, and the nurture being everything that is the result of your environment, your upbringing, your nurturing, just simply your life experiences. I will say that I find you can't really pull those two apart. You may say, well, I have big feet, or I'm tall because of my genetics. But we'll also see that you're tall because you had access to a certain diet. You might have genetically been supposed to be tall, but you didn't have that diet, so you're not tall. So for the most part, you're going to find that those features that you might believe are genetic are largely environmental as well. Okay, the third issue is continuity and discontinuity, and the best way I can explain that is that in this lifespan perspective, we often see that where we are today is a result of all the stuff that happens. So there's this continuous sense that your life follows this line of the lifespan. You're a good student because when you were in kindergarten, you learned to be a good student, or in elementary school. There's also, however, the discontinuity. So you can see how your life took a right-hand turn suddenly because one of your parents died. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be cold, but, so everything changed. Or your life suddenly changed because of some choice you made, and you have to bear the consequence. Like, you're 14 years old and now you have a child or something like that. So your life didn't go the way it was headed before. Okay, I'll say that most of the time when we have that kind of discontinuity, you will find that your life kind of does end up where you were headed in the first place. So we see continuity and discontinuity working together a great deal. All right, another point that I want you to pull from this chapter is that when we talk about human development, we're not just talking about biology. You're not looking at human development like how we are all the same, and these are the ages in which you grow faster than others or whatever. But we also want to take into account psychological forces, that which affects how you think about things and how you feel about things. You'll see a focus also on socio-cultural forces. So how you might be a different person if you had different parents, or you were raised in a different community, or something like that. Okay. This is, again, a life cycle perspective. So we're looking at life as a line, and that which happened as a childhood, in your childhood, will come back and affect how you are as an adult, or something like that. Okay? We are largely theoretical here. There's not a lot that we'll learn that this is the way it is. Memorize the answer or whatever. There's a lot that's theoretical, which means that a lot of research has gone into developmental psychology. I am assuming that you have some kind of experience with scientific method, which basically means you have an idea, or you observe life, you get an idea from it, you go and you test that idea, and then you shape that idea. That becomes theory. Okay? You can do it in a laboratory. You can watch amoebas grow and then predict their growth. Or you can do it in your real life. You see that hot girl across the room and you decide to ask her out. And you do an experiment by going out on a date. Okay? So we use that scientific method every day. Okay? All right, so toward that end, and we're theoretical here, it is important to understand that life follows a theoretical basis. Okay, in the lifespan perspective, particularly, we see how we theorize. We have an idea. We base our behavior on ideas, and there's a lot of stuff we're going over in this class that has to do with that. Predicting and understanding people, or predicting their behavior, or predicting their thinking or their feeling, and consequently you should be able to maybe pick up some really good ideas that'll help you in your life. Okay, let me point out some things. Another thing, a couple of things from this chapter, with chapter 1. There's a lot of material on research. I think one of the most important parts of this, though, is to understand that with developmental psychology, the research in developmental psychology, there's the kind of research, we call it cross-sectional research, where we'll take two different groups of people at one time and compare them. And then we also have what's called longitudinal research, where we take one group of people over a length of time and see how those people change. The reason for that is what we call cohort effects. Cohort effects. Your cohort is the group of people you belong to. That's not necessarily your choice, as in your peers and your friends. but your cohort, all the people who were born sort of in the same region about the same time. So we'll say a cohort effect would be the difference between 60-year-olds back 20 years ago and 60-year-olds now. It's two entirely different things. They're two entirely different groups. Even though age-wise they're the same age, because they were the same age at two different times, there's it's difference. I mean, you just think of something like, how do we look at war? People back in the time of World War II, that was a war that people were gung-ho about. I mean, when after Pearl Harbor, we would like go and blow people up and get revenge and all this. Maybe we have the same kind of reaction in 2001 and 2002, but you look at war in the 1960s, where the Democratic administrations, Kennedy and Johnson, get us involved in this Vietnam War. People's reactions were very, very different. Okay, and that right there, who would you say would be the party of the people who would oppose war? Well, in the 60s, it was probably the opposite of how you look at it now. That's called the cohort effect. That's because of different people's life experiences at different times. So anyway, oh my Lord have mercy, this is almost 12 minutes. That's the first chapter. A lot of good stuff in there, and so read it and interact with it, and I'm looking forward to reading what you have come up with in your discussions. Have a great week.